Hey everybody, thanks for clicking that thumbnail. Hope you enjoyed the video. And in this video is about one of the darkest periods of Habs history while I was a Habs fan. And I'm talking about the time when they traded Patrick Roy. So where I get this idea of talking about this is obviously because it's the anniversary. So it's been 25 years of that time when they traded him. The game that caused it, the actual trade. That was 25 years ago. So I read this article in The Athletic, and it was really good, and it answered some questions that I had about the time that I didn't really know, because I was having a conversation the night before I read this article, and I was actually making some arguments that I found that I was wrong about. So I thought, oh, well, let me do this in a video, and I'll give you the questions, and we'll talk about, I've got a bunch of stuff written, and we'll talk about it. So 25 years ago this week is a game that happened. That's the Detroit Red Wings against the Montreal Canadiens in Montreal, where Detroit just embarrassed Montreal 11-1. And the new coach at the time was Mario Tremblay, and he left Patrick Roy in net for 9 goals. Patrick wasn't very good that night, and honestly, the team in front of him was horrible, and he left him in for a long time because he wanted to make a point with Patrick Roy. We'll get into that. Basically, the point is he came in as a heavyweight kind of coach after a players coach in Jacques Demers got fired, and he came in to establish himself. And Patrick Roy was the big cheese in the room, and Mario Tremblay had to let him know who was boss, and this is what happened. He left him in way too long in a game that he should have been pulled after. I mean, okay, say 5 goals. He should have been pulled for sure after the first period. He should not have had to come back, and with the ego that Patrick Roy had, and a couple of other things that actually came into play. Then it was his last game. He went and asked for the trade. As we all know, we saw the clip. He walks and he stares at Tremblay. They glare at each other. Then he walks over to Ronald Corey, and he says, "This is the last game I've played for Montreal." And then from there, a few days later, the big trade. And then there's another incident that happens about 10 months later that we'll talk about as well. Everything is on there behind me on the board, so hopefully there's no spoiler alerts there, but we're going to get into it. So I'm going to read a bunch of stuff that I wrote, talking about the incidents, how I felt, I guess, about it, and answering these questions that I have. I'll read the questions to start, but I got one thing to say. So December 2nd, 1995. It's a day, or you could say a night, that will live on in infamy if you were a diehard Habs fan like me, who was 32 years old at the time. By the way, I'm wearing all black. My hat is backwards because it's kind of in mourning on the stuff that happened here. In the Athletics article it was written by Marc Antoine Gaudin, and it's a really good, in-depth article. If you have the Athletic, I suggest you look for it and read it. If you don't have the Athletic, they got ton of great prices. I mean, I find it almost hard to give up if I have to give it up, because the writers are really good. So enough of me. I am promoting the Athletic and for free. So he answers some of the questions surrounding the events of December 2nd and December 6th, and 10 months later, that was October 29th, 96. That until now, for me, have kind of remained unknown. And as a matter of fact, I even had the wrong opinion of those incidents. So number one question is it true? These are the questions here. Is it true Serge Savard was working on a trade for Roy before he was fired? And he was fired 5 games into the 1995-96 season. Number 2, was there something else pushing Roy to ask for a trade other than his embarrassing treatment by Coach Mario Tremblay that night? So, yeah, he was upset. He had a big ego. He had a lot of pride in himself. But was that enough to do what he did? And, you know, the reaction he did have to being left in too long and then doing everything after, was that all that was there, or was there more behind it, or just the tensions between him and Tremblay? Number 3 was firing Savard and hiring Reggie Hull the biggest mistake in all this? And by not firing Savard, could this have all been avoided, or at least not happen the way it did and the way it affected Montreal's future, especially in the immediate few years? And number 4, if Savard was not fired, would he have A, fired Demers, Or B, would he have hired an unproven rookie coach like Mario Tremblay at all? And number 5, why was Pierre Turgeon traded October 29th, 1996? So that's the date that I'm talking about there. That was 10 months later. And what impact did that have on the team for the future? So it's the Patrick Roy trade, the Pierre Turgeon trade. The Pierre Turgeon trade is kind of underplayed because of the Patrick Roy trade, but it kind of had just as much of an effect on the team in the immediate time going forward, and maybe even in all this 25 years, because really, in 25 years, the Habs have not been good. In small bursts, but they can't sustain it, and it's the reason, to me, in my opinion, goes back to these trades. So let's get right into it. So I firmly believe that the answers to these questions wait a second now. I firmly believe the answer to these questions is the answer to the question, why have the Habs been non-contenders for so long that they are only now, 25 years later, starting to show signs of recovering some of the status that they had in the league. The past 25 years have been the most frustrating years to be a Habs fan. Since the 1930s and 40s and the early 40s, because there was good news on the horizon in the 40s. And if you want to know about that history, I just did a video, part 1 so far, of the Habs history, because it was their birthday, and I did the early years up to 1964. So check that out. It's out in my library there, and I talk about those kind of things. So that was from the 30s and 40s, and there's no doubt in my mind that from the time Savard started to think about trading Patrick Roy, right up to the Pierre Turgeon trade about 1 year later, Montreal's hockey fate was sealed for a long time to come. And mistakes made during that time were fatal to Montreal's future success. So let's get some answers to these 5 questions. Number 1, is it true GM Serge Savard was working on a trade for a while before he was fired 5 games into the 95-96 season? The simple answer is yes, it is. He was. That makes it necessary to ask why. Why trade your number 1 goalie, maybe the best in the league and the best of all time? As fans, I mean, there was no satisfactory answer at the time. Even the one that I'm going to give you now, at the time I would have said, oh, so what, almost. But today I understand it. So let's get into the reason why. Yeah. Did I answer that? Okay, today we have a similar controversy. That's another point with Carey Price, with some fans wanting him to be traded, mostly because of his high price tag. And his less than stellar play of late. Except if you leave out the return to play, because he was great there. But really, over the last couple of seasons, 3 seasons, he hasn't been great. And with his high price tag, there's a lot of talk about let's trade Carey Price. There's a distinct difference in reasoning out between the 2 goalies, though. Patrick Roy's ego and stature in the room was interfering with the team's everyday operations, on the ice and in the room, whereas Price seemingly has no ego and causes zero strife in the room and with the rest of the team. And that is a big... Patrick Roy had his click, and he took, which I'll explain here, took a lot of air out of that room. And it's not the same with Carey Price. Carey Price, if anything, is a huge asset in the room. His calmness, his kind of, I want to say serenity for some reason. And then his coolness on the ice and his ability to play in any situation and be great. So, it shows in the room, and there's just 2 difference. They're way different. It's apples and oranges with them. But because Roy had too much influence over Coach Demers, his decision-making, and influence on the players themselves, it was thought necessary to move him in order to get control back of the room. And maybe not have to fire the players' coach, Jacques Demers. Savard had a deal for the Avs, the Colorado Avalanche's power forward Owen Nolan. Good player, and I think Patrick Roy, as far as like greatness, was greater, but this was a good player, power forward, guy that can score and do some damage on the first line. He had that in the works, along with veteran goalie Stéphane Fiset to come back. So a veteran goalie, I think he was around 30 at the time, and not nearly a Patrick Roy. Didn't make even a good goalie tandem, but it was okay. And it was a decent return for Patrick Roy. Mike Keane wasn't a part of that deal, so throwing Mike Keane in, like Reggie Hull did, wasn't a part of that. So instead, President Ronald Corey fired both Savard and Demers. I think he made Savard fire Demers, then he fired Savard. If I remember correctly, that's how it happened. And made the abominably, I can't even say it, and I wrote it, abominably bad choice to bring in Reggie Houle to replace Savard. And I wrote here, WTF. I'm not going to say the F word, but like, really, what the? I mean, like, what? Reggie Houle? And the hard-nosed rookie coach who had zero experience as far as I remember, like zero. He was in the press box talking he was in the media. I don't remember him getting experience anywhere before coming in. That's Mario Tremblay. And both were extremely underqualified and in way over their heads. And the results were disastrous and long-lasting. Houle got fleeced in the Roy trade and was totally unprepared for his role as GM. Tremblay was not a good coach at the time. He's better now after working under Jacques Lemaire for many years after this, but he was not a good coach at the time and would never have been a choice Savard would have made, in my opinion. Savard explains this and why he felt he had to trade Roy, and he wrote a book, his memoirs, and he explains it. Patrick Roy had become too important in the club. He took up too much space in the room, had too much influence on the coach. Over the previous years, I had to handle him with kid gloves. A change, and I kind of paraphrase here, but a change had become necessary. The team revolved around him too much for the good of everyone. He needed a change of scenery. So, where I was arguing with my friend Jeff that I don't think Savard would have done this, he would have, but he would have done it in a way that wouldn't have caused this to happen. It would have been, we would have had a much better return, wouldn't have given up Mike Keane. It would have been a totally different look. Stéphane Fizet, yeah, old, not great enough, but he would have bridged that gap. Jose Theodore was just drafted. He would have been here in 2-3 years. They could have managed to get through instead of getting that young Thibault, 20 years old, throw him into the fire where he was never going to have a chance for success. It was just hugely disastrous and just ridiculous. So you flash forward 46 days after Savard's firing. So this happened, didn't happen in December. It happened right at the beginning of the season, so in October. So a chance meeting on the morning of December 2nd between Roy and Red Wings goalie Mike Vernon at a local breakfast place. Roy tells Vernon about the pressure he feels in Montreal. Thoughts of retiring at 30 years old and all that stuff. And that answers question number 2. Was there something else pushing Roy to ask for a trade other than his embarrassing treatment by Coach Tremblay that night? And I say yes. Vernon told Roy of his own experience in Calgary. He's a Calgary native, and after winning the Cup in 1989 versus Roy in the Habs, oddly enough, he was feeling the same kind of pressure and the weight of being a hometown hero of sorts, because he was born in Calgary, so he won the Cup there as a hometown hero. It's not the same pressure, I don't think, as in Montreal, but it's got to still be bad. And it was getting to him and affecting his game. So he asked Flames management for a trade, and they obliged in 1994, sending him to Detroit for defenseman Steve Chiasson, who I think was a Montreal native, but I'm not sure about Chiasson, but I think so. He told Roy his story and said to him, it might be time for you to ask for a trade. The seed was planted on the morning of December 2nd, 1995, and later that night, with the embarrassing performance and deliberate lesson delivered by Tremblay, the seed was watered and grew quickly. Roy asked for that trade, and 4 days later, he got what he asked for. He got what he asked for. We as Montreal Canadiens fans, I got to write neater, got to the shaft. Really, we got the shaft, even though it was going to happen, but the return was nothing. Bag of pucks almost. Now, Marty Rosinski was an okay player, yeah. Kovalenko was a plug. He did nothing for us. And Thibault was thrown into the fire, and there was no chance of success. I think Thibault could have been a really good goalie in his career, but they ruined him by sending him here and throwing him into the fire after Patrick Roy. He's a French kid, local kid. There was no way. There was no way it was going to happen. So that brings us to question number 3. Was firing Savard and hiring Houle the biggest mistake in all of this? And by not firing Savard, could this have all been avoided? And so in my opinion, yes. If Ronald Corey would have let Savard fire Demers, which he did, he let Savard fire Demers, and find the next coach, so didn't fire Savard after doing that, there's no way he would have hired Mario Tremblay. Yes, he still would have traded Roy. That's obvious. We know that now. He still would have traded Roy, but he wouldn't have gotten fleeced. And we as, where am I? And we as Habs fans, did I write that? Oh, we would have gotten over it much faster. Yeah, I guess I left something out. Sorry about that. So we as Habs fans would have gotten over it. He wouldn't have gotten fleeced. We would have gotten used to that Roy was gone. We now have Owen Nolan. That's nothing to shake a stick at. And we would have gotten over it a lot faster than what actually happened. And the team would have fared much better over the following years. There would have been a plan in place to move forward and put there by competent people, and not these bumbling fools Ronald Corey put into place. An inexperienced GM in Houle, thrown to the wolves in the form of NHL GMs, forced to trade his star goalie. There was no way in hell he was going to get the same respect or get the same offers a highly respected GM like Savard would have gotten for a while. Just even take the Avalanche. Where was Owen Nolan then? They took it off the table because they knew they got him by the balls, and that's it. They're going to get what they want, give him the bare bones, and that's it. And he got fleeced. Hi. Where was I? Okay, and very doubtful the coach Savard would have hired to replace Demers would have put the team in such a precarious position. And quite possibly, if Savard was going to trade Roy, he may not have fired Demers at all and allowed a little more time for Demers to turn things around. So I only mean that he wouldn't have probably fired Demers if it was his choice 4 games or 5 games into the season. He would have given it 10 to 20 games, I would think. And if he doesn't turn it around by then, that would have been different. So the situation would have been totally different and a totally different outcome. And who knows? But I tell you, if he was going to trade Roy, more than likely he had to fire Demers anyway, because literally, I think Roy ruined Demers as far as being able to stay here because he had so much influence over him and all that. I think that's probably true. But we wouldn't have had Mario Tremblay. That's for damn sure. And that also sort of answers question number 4. If Savard was not fired, would he have fired Demers? I would think he did. He would have, yes. And if so, would he have hired an unproven rookie coach like Mario Tremblay? So recapping, the answers are, I think it's maybe, but I think it's still yes for Demers. And it's an absolute no on Mario Tremblay. There's no freaking way Savard would have hired Tremblay. No. If trading Roy and Keane for little return wasn't enough to cause huge holes in the lineup, there was another trade that shouldn't have happened 10 months later. That you could argue, and you could argue it's more damaging, or at the very least, it completely destroyed Montreal's ability to salvage something moving forward and hold off the total slide down the standings in the subsequent 25 years they've needed to recover from this period in their history. Question number 5, why was Pierre Turgeon traded 10 months later, and what impact did that have on the team for the future? I've always wondered why they moved on from Pierre Turgeon so quickly. I've asked it in a couple of videos when I've talked about this in some of the old, looking back. He was here for parts of 2 and 1 full season. That's it. 96 points in his full season. He's a star center, scores, playmaker. Like, why did they move on from him? I thought he slept with somebody's wife or, something behind the scenes we didn't know. And seems like that's not the reason. I said that. The reason seems to have been Saku Koivu. That's it. So it seems like Saku Koivu's emergence coming up and from third line center to second was the reason, because that meant Pierre Turgeon would shift down to the third line. Now, the Habs were happy with that. Turgeon wasn't, and he asked for the trade. So Turgeon asked to be traded because he did not want to be a third line center. I guess it's, you know, kind of going through that now with Phil Deneau. Now, Phil Deneau is not Pierre Turgeon. There's no way. I'm not saying that. But it's the similar situation, right? Deneau doesn't really want to be the third line center. That's what he's saying. Turgeon asked for the trade. That's the reason. But doesn't mean you had to give the trade right away. You could have held off a little bit. That's my opinion. You could have held off, not during the season, then do it at the next season. So with Saku Koivu, I guess I said this, but I'm going to read what I wrote. With Saku Koivu emerging into their second line center, and with Vinny Danfus as the number one, Turgeon's option was to be the third line center. Turgeon asked for the trade, and the Canadiens complied. They sent Turgeon and Craig Conroy and Rory Fitzpatrick to St. Louis for an aging and banged up Shane Corson, who everybody knows if you watch my videos. I love Shane Corson. I love Shane Corson, and I was even happy with him being back. I don't blame him for that trade. But seriously, that's what you got for Pierre Turgeon? Sorry. And Murray Barron, a defenseman who really didn't do anything, and a fifth-round pick in '97. So instead of a young power forward in Owen Nolan, we got an older Shane Corson. And I said, Shane is one of my favorite players ever for the Habs, but that was ridiculous. Get a good return for a while, hang on to Turgeon, and hold Koivu back one season, and Montreal's lineup is still decent. And that's why I have the lineup here. Brian Savage, Vinny Danfus, Owen Nolan, that's line number one. Savage, great, October, November, into December. Then he falls off as a goal scorer, but still not bad. Valerie Bure, I put the V because in case you thought we had the other, Pavel Bure? No. Turgeon, Mark Recchi on the right. Benny Brunet, Saku Koivu, Mike Keane, because he would not have been traded. Donald Brashear, Mark Bureau, and Turner Stevenson as a fourth line. And that, in my opinion, is that an A-, maybe you could say a B+ offense, but that's a decent offense. That's not the best, but that's decent, and you can get through with that. You got Vladimir Malakov, Lyle Odeline on the first pairing, Stefan Quintel, and Patrice Brisebois, and Peter Popovic and Yves Racine as the third pairing. And you got yourself a B-, maybe a C+ defense. It's not bad. It's okay. It'll do. And then you got Stefan Fiset and Pat Jablonski as your goalie. And, you know, that's maybe C caliber. It's mediocre. It's not the best. It's not going to win you a ton of games. But you're not going to be the worst team in the league either. And you can carry on from there and hopefully get better. And options are different and things change. And maybe we don't have this 25 years of total futility that they're just recovering from. And it's ridiculous. So, you know, that's where some of the mistakes were made. And I just think mistakes were made and we paid the price as fans. So they would still have offensive firepower, right? I mean, you got offensive firepower, Danfus, Turgeon, big point getters, an up-and-coming Koivu. You got Savage early in the season. Nolan was good. Recchi was good. I mean, you got some good firepower there. It's not an anemic offense. You have an okay defense, a mediocre goalie tandem. So that may not have been the best in the league, obviously, but could have been competitive and decent. And you move Turgeon 1 or 2 seasons down the road to get a top D, like for instance, maybe, you know, replace Malahov or whatever, so get a better top D. Any number of options that after that would all have led to a probable better path for Montreal and its fans and kept Montreal better positioned to win instead of the long downward spiral. We have all, players and fans alike, had to endure these past 25 years. So I'm glad I've gotten some answers and finally to these questions. So it was a really good article. I suggest you guys go read it. I could link to it in the description, but if you don't have The Athletic, the link's not going to do anything. You can't read it. So I'm not going to link to it, but if you have a subscription, you can go and get that article. So the questions I've had over this era in Habs history. I think, though, the answer to the question, this is really important, of what was the biggest mistake in all of this. What was the biggest mistake they made? and who could have made a difference in the decisions that were made. And that the answer to that question, what was the biggest mistake that they made in doing all of this? And that was firing Serge Savard. Serge Savard shouldn't have been fired, and Serge Savard wouldn't have made so many major errors. And I don't just say that because the writer also comes to the same conclusion. I was talking with Jeff the night before. We were talking about that. Even though I got it wrong that Savard wouldn't have traded Roy, I didn't know that. But what I did say that the biggest mistake that they did make was they shouldn't have fired Savard. It would have been handled way differently, even though I didn't really know the details. Savard would not have been this Keystone Cops bumbling show we saw. And it was horrible. Anyway, that's my video. Let me know what you think in the comment section about anything I said here. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Appreciate that. And if you're new to the channel or you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Ring the notifications bell. That is down there. That's going to get you your daily fix of Blue, Blanc, Rouge right here at Talkin' Habs. And I think that's it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I do appreciate that you do. Please stay safe out there. Peace out, y'all. And I shall see you next video. Bye, everybody. Have a great day, night, whatever, whenever you're watching it.